This story contains coarse language and graphic sexual assault details. Viewer discretion is advised.
On this edition of The Fifth Estate.
I strung her right out. I did strung her out.
For 3 decades, Sonya Cywink's death has remained unsolved.
You try to make sense of something and you can't make sense of it.
Her case might have gone cold, but her sister Meggie has refused to give up.
I've come to the place in my life where we're going to do everything. We're going to push. We're just going to push beyond the limits at this point.
With the help of a retired police officer, Meggie has taken to the streets to investigate for herself.
I want to know what she knows.
Okay, let's do it.
Tonight, a sister's journey to find the truth.
I just want to know the truth. What fucking happened to her?
I'm Connie Walker. This is The Fifth Estate.
I do not believe my sister would go to a place like that willingly. The location where she was found from the roadway is quite a ways inwards. So I believe that she was taken there, likely after she was dead, and put there, and it was made to look like she was assaulted there. But I don't believe that. I believe she was killed somewhere else and brought there.
How Sonya Cywink ended up here has remained a mystery for 3 decades and haunted her older sister Meggie.
You know, she was small, very petite. She wasn't really tough. She wasn't really made tough.
Meggie comes back to this site every year. That her sister's body was found in this small park 40 kilometers outside of London, Ontario, is one of the few things she knows for certain about Sonya's murder. And do you think it was possible to drive in somehow?
No, not at all. So there's no way somebody could get a vehicle back here. Yeah, so it's a long ways to bring somebody. Like, she was brought here by someone or some people.
So many questions.
So many questions, so many things to want to settle in your mind. You know, it's, I think, what everybody deserves to have, is to have answers, to have the truth.
Yeah, how are you feeling?
I don't know, as it gets closer to August 30th, I get a little bit more just nostalgic.
This is a busy week for Meggie. She's come to London, Ontario to prep for the annual ceremony she holds for Sonya. But this year, she has another mission. She wants to try to solve her sister's murder.
Especially an old case like this, right? I think police always said, well, there's no new tips and, you know, we really can't do anything. So they don't have time because they're busy doing other cases, which there are lots of other cases. Then okay, I have to do something then. I have to actively go out and find a way to find tips.
Meggie has been an advocate for missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls for years.
I have a sign for the
No, I
table.
think that's fine.
Okay. Never enough for me, you know what I mean?
Oh, yeah.
And like many families, she has had to push to get more resources on her sister's case.
Perfect.
Sonya's homicide is being investigated by the Ontario Provincial Police. Meggie says the OPP told her they didn't have any new leads. That's when she decided to go out and get her own. Since 2019, she's hit the streets of East London, where her sister lived.
She was murdered.
She was murdered, yeah. And her body was found. The last place she was seen was across the street there.
Yeah.
And there's a $75,000 reward for information leading to the arrest and conviction of the person who killed her.
Oh.
So there's $75,000.
In the 1990s, East London was a hotbed of drugs and crime, with police crackdowns happening regularly. The gritty life that surrounded Sonya there was a far cry from the beauty of her home on the Whitefish River First Nation. The Cywink sisters grew up in a big Anishinaabe family on Manitoulin Island.
So yeah, we would go out onto the lake. We built our own little raft, and we'd all be, you know, just pushing ourselves along in this raft, and we'd be just in the weeds and looking at the different fish, and just, I mean, it was just a family. It was just fun.
The second youngest of 13 children, Sonya dreamed of becoming a flight attendant and traveling the world.
She was a real girly girl. Like, she loved to wear nail polish and makeup, and I mean, she was always extremely presentable. She loved to sing. She was a great singer.
As young adults, the sisters went their separate ways, Meggie ending up in Toronto and Sonya in London, Ontario. The last time Meggie saw her sister was a month before her death. Sonya attended a family reunion back home on Manitoulin Island.
She made a really great spaghetti dinner for everybody. I hadn't seen her in months, so I was a little concerned that she was very thin. And, but she seemed otherwise very normal. So it wasn't until after she had left the reunion, and I had found a couple of items in there that indicated that she was back to using.
Sonya had struggled for years with a drug and alcohol addiction, both readily available just outside her home in East London.
Do you remember the last time you saw Sonya?
Yes, I do. We're living at, I think it's 772 Dundas Street.
Richard Orford was Sonya's friend and roommate. They met as regulars at a local bar in East London.
We walked out the front door onto the street. There was a few of us out there. And she was getting in a red car with a dark guy with lots of jewelry who I'd never seen before. And she was out there waiting for her. And she got in it, so it was somebody that she knew or had met through somebody else. And for some reason that still bothers me, that car with the white seats. It was the last time I seen her. I was probably one of the last people to see her alive.
Orford didn't know the man waiting for Sonya. They lived together for only a few months, and there were parts of her life that Sonya kept private.
She was a call girl, and she had her own clients. She never said this to customer or client or whatever. She never let any of her friends or anything in her personal life and business life be together.
Was she ever worried for her safety doing
Not that
work?
I'm aware of, never. But in that profession, there always is a chance. She wouldn't have been one to crawl in a vehicle with somebody if she thought of anything danger, or even getting stranded.
The OPP says Sonya was last seen on Thursday, August 25th, 1994. A few days later, her sister Meggie woke up with an uneasy feeling and headed to London.
It was the next day that my sister had come back from her work, and she came to the house and she said, I heard something on the news today. And she said, yeah, a woman's body had been found at the Southwold Earthworks. And she was partially clothed. And I thought, is that Sonya? And then she said, no, it can't be her. And then as soon as she said that, I knew it was her. So, and then later that evening,
The police had gone to see my dad and delivered the news, and then my brother called everybody that night. It was pretty hard.
Southwold Earthworks is an historic First Nation settlement just outside a tiny hamlet in rural Ontario. On the following Tuesday afternoon, a man foraging for wild mushrooms in the park stumbled upon Sonya's lifeless body. She was in a ditch, partially clothed with bruises on her body.
When I was working, I was tenacious and I was like a dog with a bone.
Chris Gayson was one of the first officers on the scene after Sonya was found. It was his first homicide investigation, and it took him out of his small rural detachment and into the streets of East London.
You know, I feel like we left no stone unturned, but we were never, in my opinion, close back then.
Meggie remembers at Sonya's funeral back home, a stranger showed up, a man from London who asked to speak to her dad. He said he was Sonya's boyfriend.
And had you ever met him before?
No, I didn't know anything about him.
The man revealed a shocking secret that only deepened the family's pain. Sonya was pregnant when she was killed. When we come back, Meggie talks to the father of Sonya's unborn baby.
The OPP came to me and said, at least 6 out of 10 people we've interviewed on the street have said you were the killer.
After Sonya's funeral, Meggie felt compelled to go back to London to see if she could find some answers for herself.
Everywhere you look, everyone you see, you wonder if that's them, if that's a killer. Is that the one who took my sister's life?
One of the first people she talked to was Larry Fink, the stranger who showed up at Sonya's funeral. DNA would confirm he was the father of Sonya's unborn child.
Who was Fink? Like, do you know him?
Well, I met him. First time I met him was at my sister's funeral. Didn't even know he existed.
What was your impression of him?
Like somebody I really didn't trust.
In 1994, Sonya frequented an after-hours bar that Fink ran in a garage. We found Fink had multiple run-ins with police that same year. A few months before Sonya was killed, Fink was charged with assaulting a woman in London. 2 people we spoke to who didn't want to come on camera say they pointed police to Fink. Meggie remembers asking Fink about Sonya's life in London before her death.
Started asking him, it's like, you know, what happened and any details he might have known. They weren't living together. Wasn't that kind of relationship? Like he had a separate, maybe he had a separate life from her. You know, I don't know all of the details around that. But I wanted to know everything he knew, which he seemed to know very little.
How big of a focus was Larry Fink in those early days in your investigation?
Oh, I mean, he was somebody that we spoke to, like several other people. You know, I mean, as far as interviewing and taking DNA, you know, that was, yeah. I mean, that's all I can really talk about.
Years later, Fink was interrogated again by police after 2 child welfare disputes turned violent.
Where the evidence is there, buddy. Well, that's fine. Prove it. There's only 2 people. Go to North and prove it.
Following Sonya's death, Fink's life seemed to spiral out of control and onto a collision course with the justice system.
I'm not even interested in talking to you. I didn't think it's all over. It's all over. I knew you turn the TV off. No, the tape is still on. Have a seat. I don't want to. I'm tired. I'm going to lay down and go to bed. No, just have a seat.
In 1995, Fink fathered a child and fought for custody. When he was unsuccessful, He abducted the child and was arrested in Nova Scotia. Fink was sentenced to 2 years in jail.
I know how far I can go and how far I can't go.
In 2004, Fink had another child and another run-in with child welfare authorities. When police attempted to seize his baby, Fink barricaded his family in his mother's home in Halifax. When a shot was fired from the house, police evacuated the street.
I want to make a request that we move the staging area down to the next intersection.
The standoff lasted 3 days and ended when his elderly mother died of natural causes inside the home. With a shotgun slung over his shoulder, Fink carried out his mother's body on a stretcher. Following the standoff, Fink was sentenced to 4.5 years in prison.
I can't understand why the press doesn't print the cost to the public.
Meggie lost track of Fink, but always had lingering questions about his involvement in Sonya's life. Then one day, she got a message from him on Facebook. "Hi, Meggie. I'm the father of Sonya's baby, and I would like to speak with you," he wrote. "I know more about what happened than any other on earth."
Hey, Larry.
Meggie got him on the phone. He was living in the Philippines. She recorded the call.
First of all, I'm dying of cancer, Maggie. I'm in God's hands.
We've been told that Fink has since died. But in 2020, he told Meggie on the phone that after Sonya was killed, many people looked to him for answers about her death.
The OPP came to me and said, at least 6 out of 10 people we've interviewed on the street have said you were the killer. We want you to take a polygraph. So I said, you need to tell me that I killed my own baby.
When was the last time you saw Sonya that weekend?
I didn't.
You didn't see her? You hadn't seen her?
The last time I saw her, I was having supper at the TNC. I ate there every night.
Fink denied seeing Sonya the weekend she was killed, but he did admit to Meggie that he had previously put Sonya in dangerous situations.
What happens? I went up and saw McKeown, and I said, I want to beat all of that fucking dirty crap. I don't want the clean stuff, clean cocaine. I want that dirty fucking shit. You know, that's strange.
Mm-hmm, right.
So I got Sonya upstairs, and I said, get it into you, Sonya. You haven't had enough. And I smoked it with her, right? I'm going to have some, right? Come on, let's do it. So I strung her right out. I mean, strung her out, you know? And I got to the problems, right?
Then he said Sonya told him about a dark secret from her past.
When she was 12 years old, she was gang raped. I don't know what you know about it, if you even know anything.
Meggie did know her sister's secret. They were only a year apart in age and always very close.
She was sexually assaulted in our community.
Did she confide in you when it happened?
She did. She did. We never talked about it again, and I didn't know how to help her. I was a kid, you know? I was sworn to secrecy.
Meggie believes the assault changed the trajectory of her sister's life, and it's haunted Meggie ever since.
I mean, I was the only one that knew. So, you know, it was one of those secrets that you kept knowing, but never knowing as a kid what that would end up doing. But the secret of like never telling anybody else, of never speaking of this again, was probably the most painful part of it, you know? And I never ever thought to bring it up with her again, to say, how are you doing, or do you want some help? I never really thought about that. I mean, it was evident with her behavior, it was evident with her lifestyle that, you know, she was in crisis. She needed help, but I was oblivious to that. I'm ashamed of that. I feel like I failed her.
when we come back. Meggie, frustrated with police, takes the investigation into her own hands.
Did you drive Sonya anywhere that night?
I went a few places with your sister.
My question's always been is how did they get her down here?
Meggie's husband, Tom, has been helping her to try to find out what happened to her sister.
But I mean, even dragging somebody for 10 minutes.
They were joined by former detective Chris Gayson after he retired from the OPP.
What were your expectations initially when...
To solve it. 100%. Yes. Yeah, 100%. To solve it, to figure it out. It was unfinished business. I mean, the plan was, before COVID, to talk to some of Sonya's acquaintances. I mean, I just knew 2 key people that we had to go talk to.
One of them was a woman who approached Meggie with a tip in 2019. Gayson and Meggie recorded their interview with her.
Yes. And Denise, you'll agree to be taped?
Yes, I agree to be taped.
Okay. Yes. Awesome.
Denise Beeswax is a friend of the Cywink family from the Chippewas of the Thames First Nation, south of London.
Well, I knew a lot of the people that was involved.
In 1994, Beeswax knew the scene in East London. She told Meggie what she had heard, that Sonya had gone to a party at a house not far from where her body was found.
I just heard that she was picked up at the TNC and driven to the party.
That's the town and country?
Yeah. She was picked up there, and she was driven to the party. And I was told that a piece of crack went missing, like a $20 rock. And she got blamed for it, and she got smacked, and she fell. And she died.
And did you ever think about telling the authorities what you had heard?
I went right to the police station in Strathroy, and I told them what I knew.
When was this?
It wasn't long after. It was kind of after I had pieced it together, like who was involved and what had happened. I don't know, they just kind of brushed me off or whatever and said that it kind of muddies the water or something like that. And
Muddies the water? What do you think they meant by that?
I don't know.
Before she came forward, Gayson had never heard of Denise Beeswax or her story of Sonya being killed because of a drug dispute. But just a few months later, another woman reached out to Meggie with a similar story. The woman told Meggie she knew Sonya and had information about her death. Meggie asks, "Please answer a question that I could never figure out. What do you want to know? Why did they take Sonya to Ioanna Station? To the earthworks? I'm not sure. The police took me there also. Someone told the police she was with me that day."
She wanted to talk to me. So she asked me for my phone number. She gave me her phone number. Anyways, we ended up talking for quite a while.
Meggie had several phone calls with the woman, but she always said she didn't feel safe telling her everything she knew on the phone. Today, Meggie has tracked her down and wants to talk to her in person.
She gave me an address on Tecumseh Street, and I have a phone number. So that's the deal. We're going.
When Meggie told Gayson about the woman, he remembered her. She had been a person of interest in his investigation 30 years ago.
I'm not sure when the OPP have last talked to her. I mean, obviously, we talked to her quite a bit. You know, during that first 6 months, the first year. Even actually 4 years later, we talked to her again. But whether they've done any follow-up, they're not going to tell us. You know, but I guess for our sake, you know, for your sake, you want to know.
Yeah, this is a good opportunity. We're right here. I think she'll come along. I really do.
We were there when Meggie picked up the woman and drove her to a local park in London. Meggie recorded the conversation.
And then the cop said, "You killed her." I was the #1 suspect. They took my blood, they took my DNA. They said I was the #1 suspect.
For her safety, we are not identifying the woman, and her voice has been replaced by an actor. She denied hurting Sonya, but says she was with her that night at a party and gave her drugs.
What party did she go to that night she went missing? Where did she go to? She went somewhere.
She went to the clubhouse.
Clubhouse?
Yeah.
I thought so. Yeah. That's where everything went down, eh? Could say it. It's all right.
There were a number of criminal organizations operating in London at that time, and there's been speculation about whether any of them were involved in Sonya's death.
They were calling for escorts. Is that right?
Right.
Yes?
Yeah. And they passed them on.
They passed them on.
They passed them on and made them do things.
Right.
And when they don't want to do things, they're beaten. It wasn't about money. It was about what she wouldn't do.
Oh, it was about what she wouldn't do. You know what? Look at me. Look at me. It's 30 years. All we want to know is the truth. Like, I don't want to hold anyone accountable. I just want peace, you know what I mean? I want some peace in my life. I want to give her peace and her baby. They deserve it. They deserve to be free from this.
I should have said something.
What fucking happened to her?
They beat her.
The woman wouldn't tell Meggie the exact location of the party or the name of the person who beat her sister, but she tells Meggie the name of someone else who she claims was a witness to the assault on Sonya. Meggie wants to continue investigating, but she's getting resistance from those closest to her.
I want to know. And I don't know if the police, and the way they do things and how they do it, would ever get those answers.
We don't feel they could get the answers, but we don't know they can't get the answers. And you're also dealing with a group of individuals that are criminals. And you can't begin to understand a criminal's mind. You can't understand what they're capable of. And we would have a serious conversation unless there was some major backup for Meg to go back in.
You're worried that she
Oh,
could
I'm
be
definitely
an
worried now. At the elevation we're at in this investigation, yes, I don't feel comfortable for my wife.
Do you worry about your safety if you
No,
continue?
she doesn't worry, no. That's why I'm here.
After the break, we uncover documents that reveal new information about Sonya's death.
So here's another thing. The family has never seen the autopsy reports or the toxicology reports, and it's shocking.
More than 30 years has passed since Sonya's death. And although she feels closer than ever to getting answers about her sister's murder, Meggie is standing down. After interviewing the woman who claimed she was at a party with Sonya that night, Meggie gave the recording she made to the OPP and is hoping they will follow up on the new leads.
I think now the OPP has a lot more direct link to my sister's death. And so, I mean, there were individuals mentioned in that recording. And so if they don't follow it up, I'm gonna blow a gasket. You know, I mean, how can you give them everything that, it's like on a golden platter, silver platter, if you will, and them not do anything with it? Like, I would be not honoring my sister's life, and I can't have that.
Meggie has been pushing the OPP for years, trying to keep her sister's case at the forefront. And now she's working with a lawyer to help get answers from police.
As you know, I wrote a letter to Detective Inspector Randy Gaynor of the OPP because he's been overseeing the case.
Jessica Zita agrees with Tom that Meggie shouldn't have to investigate her sister's murder.
Is that like the state of affairs we're operating under? No civilian should feel that they have no options but to investigate the death of their loved one themselves. Because that's actually a very dangerous, precarious position to put oneself in without any proper reinforcement.
According to Gayson, that's the reality for families once a case goes cold.
You know, I've said it before to Meg, I think families have to not be completely reliant on the police and just try to dig up new information themselves.
I mean, it's kind of shocking to hear you say that, Chris, saying family members shouldn't rely only on police for these unsolved cases. When did you start believing that? I mean, you were a police officer for 30 years.
Well, I mean, since I retired, obviously, I've had time to think about things. It's just logical. I mean, it makes sense.
Late last year, Zita met with the detective inspector in charge of Sonya's case. He told her the DNA they collected from the crime scene was contaminated and shared other insights into their initial investigation back in 1994.
I think that there were definitely mistakes. There were mistakes in how things were handled.
Zita said the detective inspector pointed the finger at the original investigators in Sonya's case.
I can't say for certain what went wrong, but it just seems like there were gaps left, or there were things that were not properly followed up on. There were, problems just even in basic note-taking. It seems like there was just miscommunication internally that we're still trying to fill in now, like many, many, many years later.
They told her that part of the problem is the original investigation, that there were mistakes made, that there were leads that weren't followed up on, that there was poor note-taking.
As far as that first year, I'm content, I'm at peace, that we did everything possible. I mean, there was ample resources. Could we have all done better at times? Maybe, but I don't know. I think we did a thorough job.
But we discovered there were some things about the original investigation that even Gayson wasn't aware of.
So here's another thing. The family has never seen the autopsy reports or the toxicology reports. It's shocking.
Zita had never seen the report, so she had to rely on what the OPP said in a meeting late last year. Despite the fact they had been investigating for decades, they told her that Sonya's death may not have been the result of homicide.
The autopsy reports, from what I'm told, say that Sonya's death resulted from a mixture of injury, of blunt force trauma, but also the drugs that she had in her system. So that you can see how that might change things.
How? Can you spell it out?
Well, what was told to me, which is, again, hearsay, but also I have to think that it came from the report itself, was that she was hurt, she was injured, but it was because of her toxicology that she wasn't able to help herself in that situation. And it might have been a situation that another person in a different state might have survived.
Mm.
So that kind of takes the sting out of how murderous this might have been.
After our interview with Zita, we obtained the original coroner's report. It said Sonya was found naked from the waist down, wearing only socks an open shirt, and a ring. Her body was found in a ditch in a shaded area. She was battered. The autopsy noted over 20 contusions and abrasions on the front and back of her body, as well as her neck and face. The report concluded trauma associated with cocaine intake could have caused Sonya's death. But despite the signs of violence on her body, whether her death was accidental or homicide cannot be determined.
And what was the cause of death in your understanding?
Blunt force trauma. Blunt force trauma.
But this autopsy doesn't say that. It says it's undetermined. That it wasn't blunt force trauma that necessarily resulted in her death.
Yeah. I'm not aware of the wording then of that, of that saying that.
Gayson was confused by the report and upset at the suggestion that Sonya's death wasn't a homicide.
Can I read this for a second?
Yeah, for sure. Definitely read it.
I would think I would have read it at some point, but so the initial findings showed blunt force trauma to the upper body, but he felt not enough to cause her death.
Her death.
According to the autopsy, the undetermined ruling was made a year after Sonya's death, around the same time that the original OPP investigation seemed to wind down. As an advocate for missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls, Meggie has worked with families in a similar situation that she was now in. Despite what they see as clear violence inflicted on their loved ones, their cause of death is ruled undetermined and then ignored.
It's not just a question about Sonya. It's a question about hundreds, and I mean hundreds, of other cases that have been also undetermined through the autopsy reports, because families come forward and they go, oh, it's undetermined, so that means like it's not a murder. I question this whole scenario in terms of how did her body end up there? Why was she positioned in the way she was? Why was she partially clothed? Like, why take all those steps to hide something? And then we find out many other mitigating facts about her death, and we put it all together, and it's a fucking homicide, regardless.
Unbeknownst to Meggie, the chief pathologist of Ontario, Michael Polanin, had come to the same conclusion. In 2016, he was asked to review Sonya's case. He was unable to completely agree with the original report due to the serious injuries found on Sonya. He said because her injuries were most likely due to assault, the manner of death is homicide.
You just think about your loved one being out there in that position. You think about, the detail of the autopsy in terms of description. How does anybody reconcile with somebody they loved being that way? How? I don't know. So I think that is painful.
We wanted to ask the OPP about the coroner's reports and suspect Larry Fink and whether they had followed up on any of Meggie's tips, but they declined our interview request. They said in a statement that Sonya's death is being investigated as a homicide and that her case is active and ongoing. Last August, at the site where her body was found, Meggie held another memorial to honor Sonya.
Love you. Love you. That eagle's flying high just for us.
Investigating an unsolved murder 30 years later is fraught. People are scattered or dead, memory fades, and families are still grappling with their grief.
I want to acknowledge yourselves for taking the time to get here today, to make an effort to be with us, to stand with us. And I think most importantly, through this 30 years of wanting to find the answers to my sister's murder.
Haunted by the past and a promise to her sister, Meggie pushes on, keeping the police engaged, hoping her relentless pursuit will yield some new piece of evidence that will finally, after all this time, provide the answers she is looking for.
I think all I really want and all my family want, we just want the truth. This work is part of healing. We're all healing day by day. And I think we have to walk through our traumatic lives sometimes in order to get to the other side of healing.